Well, welcome everyone. I'm Kevin Hatfield, the Interim Assistant Director for Academic Initiatives with Residence Life, and on behalf of University Housing, I welcome all of you to the DeMet Lounge this evening, and thank all of you for attending tonight's Community Conversation panel. Tonight's panel is titled, and this is phrased as an interrogative, so Little Adults, ? An exploration of changing concepts and experiences of childhood. The Community Conversation series is a living learning initiative of University Housing, and the panel discussions are co-produced by the students of the Hamilton Think Tank and the Walton Advisory Board, which are two academic student groups in the residence halls. Tonight's panel was conceived by the students of the Walton Advisory Board, or WAB as it's affectionately known by its members. And that group meets weekly in this lounge at 5 p.m. on Wednesdays. And I'd just like to retender our standing invitation to any students who would like to participate in community conversations. We'd love to have you join us and drop in when you have time. We'd love to have your ideas. I also want to acknowledge our co-sponsors for the Community Conversation series, the Robert D. Clark Honors College, Oregon Humanities Center, and Undergraduate Studies. Finally, you've probably noticed some comment cards on your chairs this evening. We'd really value your feedback about tonight's panel, so if you could please take a moment and complete those, we'd love to have your comments. Tonight's panel will conclude about 9 p.m., and so if you could hold your questions until the final panelists have completed their opening comments, we'd really appreciate that. We should have at least 30 minutes or more for questions and just kind of open question and answer session at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel this evening. Begin here to my left, Dr. Dan Close, Associate Professor in the College of Education and Family and Human Services. Dan's also a colleague of ours in Residence Life. He's faculty in residence, and I thought I'd give a plug to his office hours this term. He's holding office hours in the Living Learning Center North, just adjacent to the Ducks Bistro, and I believe those are from 2 to 3:30 on Mondays. Great, so please come and visit Dan. Sandy Schoonover, Director of Residence Life, who also is a close collaborator with all of our academic initiatives in the residence halls. Next to Sandy, Alishiya Halaney, who's a graduate teaching fellow in educational studies in the College of Ed, and who is also a former FA of Dan. And the FIG, I was trying to remember the name of the FIG was? Education and Social Services. Yes, so we're well represented by the College of Education this evening. And Prasong Saihong, who's a graduate student in Early Intervention Program in the College of Education, and he's also an International Cultural Services Program scholarship student. We had another scheduled guest this evening, who you notice is not with us, Dr. Lou Moses, Associate Professor and Head of the Psychology Department, who was unable to join us because of illness. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the panel, and maybe Dan, we'll just start with you and work our way down.
Great. When Kevin asked me to participate in this panel, I immediately got the image of trying to make the case for youth empowerment. One of the things that I'm working with in my research is the idea that so many adults in our society have a stereotypic and sometimes a negative view of youth. So I'll just ask you for a second. What is your image of an organization or an agency that's dedicated to youth services? Do you get an idea of youth spending their time dreaming of careers, great business enterprises, travel? Or do you get an idea of youth in trouble? Youth that have possibly drug and alcohol issues, or maybe they're not connected to their families, or they're not doing well in school. And unfortunately, if you look at research, and the research that looks at the public impressions of youth, for the most part, adults have a pretty negative and stereotypic view of youth. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight was the idea of youth empowerment. Not necessarily youth empowerment among the youth of the dominant culture or those of privilege, but of youth that are, say, multicultural, or youth that are at risk for negative outcomes in their lives, or youth that come from low-income families. And I'm doing a lot of work with those young people today. In fact, in Lane County, we have several organizations that are dedicated to youth empowerment. And it's interesting to meet these young people because they have a stereotypic view of adults. And they think most of us are power hungry, insensitive. And when I meet with these young people and I begin talking with them about what their dreams and aspirations are, they very much match up with the students that I have here at the University of Oregon. Meaning that they have goals to be full participants in society. They have goals for meaningful personal lives, goals to have significant impact on society, but they don't have a way to access this because they perceive, rightly or wrongly, that adults have all the power. And that realistically, if you don't follow the rules of society, you end up on the wrong side of that power structure. So my goal for tonight is to talk to you about youth empowerment from the perspective of how can we begin the process of teaching youth, especially this population that I identified early, low-income, multicultural, and at-risk youth, to participate in power-making activities so that they can begin to appreciate and understand and access the privilege that many of us pretty much take for granted. And so this research is an interesting body of research because it does require a change in philosophy on the part of adults. Now, what I like about the University of Oregon and the kinds of housing programs that I participate in is that they're very much youth-directed, very much student-directed, very much empowering for all of you who have a great stake in what it is this education is all about for you. But low-income, multicultural, and at-risk youth do not share that same perception. They don't believe that the educational, social, or political system is stacked in their favor. And in fact, in many cases, they will look at individuals who have been in their school systems or been in their communities and who are accessing this as somehow different than themselves. And what we're attempting to do is to provide an environment for these young people that gives them the sense of power, that gives them the sense of ownership of their communities, of their educations. But to do so requires, again, this fundamental shift, both in terms of how adults view their power-sharing relationship and how youth gain access to this power. So, the key idea that's being promoted by the local organizations that I'm working in, and the primary group that I'm working with is called LEAD. And it refers to leadership, education, adventure, and discovery. And what LEAD's all about is an organization that serves low-income, multicultural, and at-risk youth and gives them the very tools that you all utilized to get to college. If you look at the demographics of who goes to college these days, there's a significant number of youth who don't even graduate from high school, much less access higher education. As I look at the research, I see that approximately 60% of youth in this country either start college or some kind of higher education experience, but don't follow through beyond the first or second year. So 60% of our youth in this country are not accessing the very tools that give them the opportunity to gain and share in power. So how is it that we can teach a group of young people to begin accessing, utilizing, and participating in the very vehicle that has allowed each of us to lift ourselves and to become part of the power structure of this country? The key concept that we're working with right now is to involve youth in all aspects of governance. Now that sounds like a simple idea. But what it fundamentally means is that governance is what are the rules and structures and missions that guide certain activities? Now, if you look at the University of Oregon, and you look at who runs the show here, how many opportunities do youth have to guide and direct the fundamental academic services here at the University of Oregon? How much access do you have to the levers of power? Now, clearly students have the opportunity to participate in the Oregon Board of Higher Education. Get one seat. I think that's one seat out of all the college students in the state of Oregon. Now, certain aspects of the university, they do have power. Housing, certain departments are much more empowering of their youth. But fundamentally, most of you have little say at all as to what it is that governs your experience here. You don't have much say in terms of how your money is spent, what the requirements are for you to get a bachelor's degree. Now, because you're satisfied with that, and because you're not necessarily disenfranchised by that process, very few of you will be activists about that leadership and that power, because you're in the stage of beginning to access and participate in power. But imagine if you're sitting on the outside. Imagine if you're sitting as a sophomore in high school and you realize there's no way you're going to graduate from high school. Nobody in your family's ever graduated. None of your friends are graduating. Most of your friends have already dropped out. And you're sitting there faced with the prospect of, what am I going to do with my life? And this is what youth empowerment does, is to begin the process of teaching young people how to become involved in these governance types of activities. Now, our experience right now is that when youth do participate in these governance activities, their first experience is that they don't trust the adults that they're involved with. Because the adults continue to dominate the levers of power. They're the directors, they're the presidents, they're all of these leadership positions, and they have a youth member simply in many cases as a token. And what the organizations need to do to evolve to the point where youth have a meaningful role in this governance is to give up the power and to give that power to young people. Now, what happens if you, for example, are given the opportunity to be the head of housing or the head of, well, we won't go that quite, but to give you the opportunity to lead and direct? How about design your own major? Determine which prerequisite classes that you want to take. Or determine how you want to have your meal program be totally organized. Or any aspect of your experience here. You would get into that context and into that setting, and the first thing you'd realize is that there's a set of rules that you don't understand. And this is what youth are telling us, is that there's so many rules that we can't possibly understand how to access these leadership groups because there's so many people that know more than we do. In youth leadership and empowerment groups, what's happening is that the leaders, the adults, readily give youth access to this information. Readily give them opportunities to lead. Readily give the youth the opportunity to make mistakes so that in that process they begin to learn how to behave in a leadership way and how to gain these different skills. In our experience, what we find is that when we give power to students, that there's a reaction, a negative reaction on the part of adults in leadership. Because we don't like the way they behave. They're too pushy. They're demanding. They don't necessarily behave in a professional manner in the context of a meeting. They're demanding. And see, part of what we're arguing for is an evolutionary concept. That to learn how to be part of the lever of power is something that people do when, in fact, they have power. Whereas if you don't have power, you're constantly struggling and fighting up against a set of rules that you don't necessarily understand. So my argument finally is that we need to take the youth empowerment argument, because youth, and basically I define youth as anybody younger than me. Excuse me. But when we usually use the term youth from a research perspective, we're usually talking about people between about 12, 22, 23. Meaning that they're still in a situation where they're gaining skills, gaining knowledge, gaining opportunities, but haven't taken on many of the responsibilities of economics, etc. The decision-making necessities that I'm referring to are that organizations have to be organized in such a way to give youth, be it students, be it the low-income, at-risk population that I'm referring to, the levers of decision-making and governance so that they experience both the exhilaration and the energy of decision-making and the responsibilities of power. Adults own the power. And typically the power is owned by white male adults. And so we need a larger group of individuals, such as myself, to begin the process of mentoring young people, especially young people who seek a seat at the table to begin to have this process of power. And I'd welcome any of your ideas to support these ideas. And I have a couple case studies locally that I'd be glad to share with you during our question and answer period. Thank you.
Good evening. When Kevin asked me to be a part of the panel, we talked a little bit about why would a director of residence life actually be up on this panel. And I think that there is no greater time when you look at a transition from childhood to young adulthood is when you come to college. And so we started, Kevin and I started bantering about a little bit about this, and what I really want to do tonight is a few things. I want to talk very briefly about some history about things in residence halls and on college campuses, and what it used to be like, maybe for lack of a better, back in the day. And I have a few handbooks actually from the 60s and the 70s, and I am going to read a few of the things that are out of those handbooks, because I think that you would find it to be vastly different from today's handbook or things that you might find in residence halls. And I'm also just going to briefly go over some things that guide us in respect to the work that we do with college students, not only at the University of Oregon, but at many other institutions also. And when we really look back into the higher education and the start of higher education at Harvard, quite often, first I might tell you that only men were allowed in at first.
White men or just men?
Just white men.
Yeah.
And that they actually lived quite often in, at that time they called them dormitories, so I will use the word dormitory, but I don't usually have that in my vocabulary. I do think that we have residence halls. But that they actually lived in the dormitory quite often with their faculty mentor or faculty members. So not only did they go to classes with them, they actually came home and probably sat around quite often engaging in conversation with their faculty members. and they lived there with them. When we got to probably, I would say, right now, much of that time and that time period, and even in the up into the 1900s, 1940, 1950, 1960, there was a doctrine that many colleges would go by called in loco parentis, which is Latin for in the place of a parent. And it really refers to the responsibility that a person or an organization can take that functions as the responsibility of the parents. So when parents would drop off, maybe at this time in the 50s, 60s, when they would drop off their son or daughter to a college campus, they would expect that they would that the institution would look after them much as they would look after them. And so there are all sorts of rules and regulations in place at that point to help with that, especially in the residence halls. Right around in towards the tail end of the 1960s, and if you might think just overall in history that the 60s was very much a decade of unrest and also wanting to break away from establishment. Right around in 1970, there was a new law passed called the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, and we refer to that as FERPA. And basically what FERPA did, oh, by the way, the authors of FERPA were Senators Pell and Senator Buckley. And if you recognize that name, Pell, he's also one of the people who drafted the Pell Grant that people receive yet today in financial aid. But they drafted a little a new doctrine and a new law that basically talked about that FERPA gave people the right to look at their educational records. So if you were under the age of 18, that parents had the ability to look at your educational records and make sure that they were accurate, and if they weren't accurate, make sure that there was corrections that were to be made. And under FERPA, it said when you're at 18 and at a university or a college, that you are in charge of your records and that you are the person who has the ability to look at your records and make those changes. And what that basically did for universities is that how we governed and what we did with students, we could no longer just necessarily pick up the telephone and call a parent if something had happened, or if you were failing your classes, or if there were judicial violations. All of those were covered under FERPA, and that was a part of your education record. And unless we had your permission, that we would not disclose things to your parents. Now today we're still governed under FERPA in the work that we do here at the university, so oftentimes there are lots of things that we can't tell parents, even though parents want us to tell them, even though parents might say, I pay your bill, but even if they pay the bill, it doesn't matter. That's really between them and you as college students. However, we sort of see a little bit of the pendulum swinging, not by federal legislation at this point, but we do see a pendulum swinging to a certain extent with the new millennial generation, where we have a lot more parental involvement in the work that we do on college campuses. And parents, I'm sure you've probably heard of the term helicopter parents, because they hover, and that's really good in some respects, and in other instances sometimes they might have to let go just a little bit to let their son or daughter really do some things on their own and explore some other things. I just read a recent article that said in a study of parents who are helicopter parents that their sons or daughters actually do better in college, and I was quite amazed by that. And it was in the Chronicle of Higher Education, I believe is where I had read that recently. But what I really wanted to do is talk a little bit about and do some readings from some very old, well, for some of you it might be very old, some books, some of the handbooks that students had when they were in school. And so I'm going to do some of that. I might ask you to see if you can guess what year it is after I've read some of it. But I might tell you that I had hoped to be able to go down into our archives and look for some of these, but I wasn't able to. So I have a colleague who works at who worked and went actually to Western Oregon State, and he at that point, at a few points, it was called Oregon College of Education here.
OCE.
OCE. So you might hear that referred to in some of the things that I'm reading. But the first thing I wanted to read to you is about phone duty. All freshmen are required to sit an hour phone duty each week. If a freshman misses phone duty, he or she will be called before Hall Council and will either have to sit additional phone duty or be given some other type of punishment. When answering the phone, say one of the following, whichever is appropriate. Good morning, blank call, may I help you? Good afternoon, mass call, may I help you? Good evening, mass call, may I help you? Answer the phone after the first ring. Do not let it ring repeatedly. After finding who the party on the phone wishes to speak with, use the buzzer system, explained on page 12, to contact the person. If the person is not in, ask the party on the phone if you can take a message. If you leave a message, write it down accurately on a phone message slip and place it in their mailbox in the lounge. If a person comes into the lounge and wishes to see someone, offer to buzz them. Then use the buzzer system to do so. If they are not in, ask for a message. If for some reason you are unable to sit phone duty, contact either a dorm officer or Mrs. Shardell before your duty time. Persons sitting phone duty should remember that there is to be no card playing or other games allowed while on phone duty. Also, the person on phone duty should not allow a large crowd to form around the phone duty area. Those on phone duty are to sit at the phone desk for at least 1 full hour. If at any time the phone rings and there is no one on phone duty, it is up to the freshman in the lounge area or in hearing distance of the phone to answer it. Now, can you imagine today having to do phone duty in the residence halls?
Well, in sororities you do.
Yeah. That's a great point. Quite often in sororities, you might have to do phone duty.
I did that in boarding school.
There you go. A few people did that in boarding school. Can anybody guess maybe what year this might have been written? Just throw out. Oh, well, maybe.
When I was in college. Late 60s.
Late 60s. This one was 1964-65. So. Here's another one. Let's think about our visitation policy here and our policies about how you come and go from the residence halls. Signing in and out is a policy devised for your own benefit in case of an emergency. In the residence halls for women, all residents must sign out of the dorm after 6 p.m. or when leaving the campus. When the resident leaves for overnight or for a weekend, she must fill out the white slip and have it signed by the head resident. Remember to sign back in. Women students planning to stay overnight at another campus must secure a written invitation from the house mother of that house in which she will stay. Students planning to stay overnight at the home of a friend are expected to secure an invitation. You are given 15 late minutes per term in case of an emergency. If you realize that you are going to be late, call the house mother. I can't even imagine what that would be like today. Any thoughts of maybe when, and you can't answer this one, Dan, of when this one might have been? Pretty.
Maybe like 1961.
Well, this one was 1965-66, but that's a good one. But so right around in that same one, you can tell that if you want afterwards, you certainly can come up and look at these. They're very interesting. And on the typewriter, there's one here that I had that's in mimeograph. So. Very interesting. They also they did have Charlie Brown and Snoopy back then. I wanted to read just a few other ones. I wanted to talk about the candle lighting ceremonies that used to happen. A candle lighting occurs when a fellow dorm resident becomes engaged. She decorates a candle and attaches her engagement ring to it. In our darkened lounge, all dorm residents gather. The girls in the unit having the candle lighting sit in a circle on the floor, while the rest of the girls fill in outside the circle. The candle is lit and passed around the circle, giving each girl a chance to look at the ring. On the second passing of the candle, the betrothed blows out the candle and thus announces her engagement. During the passing of the candle, all is very quiet. After the engaged blows out the candle, "Our Best to You" is sung. This song is also sung at mealtime after the bride-elect eats her pie under the table. After the song is sung and the lights are turned, questions in good taste may be asked.
Sororities still have that.
Sororities still do that, so they do carry on some of those traditions even today.
This is a public.
But
This is for public residents.
this was a public, this was a residence hall. And I have one other final thing that I'm going to read, and then I'm going to turn it over, and we can do some other readings also. Oops, that is. I marked the wrong page, unfortunately. That's not the one I wrote.
What year was the engagement one?
That one was 68, 69.
I was a sophomore that year.
Okay, that's not the one I wrote. I'm trying to look for a little note from the house mother. Most residence halls back in the 60s and even sometimes still in the 70s and had house mothers, much like sororities and fraternities sometimes do today. So I was trying to find I'll have to keep looking for it and I'll get back to you, but there's a little note in here from the house mother. And believe me, the house mother was someone who you definitely wanted to get to know, and you did not want to not do something that would be disapproving from the house mother. And very, very revered. But very few residence halls nowadays have house mothers. We have professional staff, but we still have staff living in the buildings, and so they can be mothers, they can be fathers, they could be a variety of different things, but not the traditional formal house mother that that most people can conjure up or even see in the movies that would actually happen back in the day. So I'll keep looking for that, and I'll turn it over to Alishiya.
Okay, thanks. That was really interesting. My little contribution here is going to be brief. I also wanted to talk a little bit about my own personal experience. I'm from India, and I've been here in Eugene for 4 years, the beginning of my 5th year now. And I have to say, I have loved every second of being a FIG TA and having lived as a resident here in the dorms. And this is such a new concept here for me, because back home, I come from Bombay, which is a big city. It's like 14 million people, and it's located on the southwest border of India. And our college systems are very different. I know that here, not all colleges have residence halls. But for the most part, I think universities here do. And back home, it's not like that. It's just, you have the building and it's more like a day school, and so you just go and then you go back home. And then the kind of work too, because of the cultural difference, usually you go back to a family business. If you're a son, then you're forced. You don't really have a choice. You have to do what your father does. And if you're a daughter, you kind of learn more things like knitting or crochet, cooking classes, or traditional Indian dance classes, things like that. So it's very, very gender rolled as well. And so and also another cultural difference that I see here is that students have this casual one-on-one friendly interaction with the professors here. And back home, it's not like that. You know, you have to say Mr. so-and-so or Mrs. and you don't always look them in the eye, and it's a very, very formal setup. So here when professors, say, oh, you can just call me by my first name, it's such an awkward thing. It's like, no, I can't do that, It's and now I'm in the master's program, in the couples and family therapy program, and it's a very very intense, very close-knit program where we're only a class of 17 of us. And since we see clients and we're doing training, our professors are our supervisors. And so, if a crisis situation comes up or you're seeing a certain client, you have a certain case and you don't know what direction to take it, and you really need advice, our professors give us their cell phone numbers. And that was another awkward thing. We were like, no way, I'm not going to be able to dial my professor's cell phone number. And they always say, call us anytime, this is important stuff. And so it's just interesting, the dynamics, how they're different. And then actually Remy contacted me about the topic for tonight's discussion, and the changing experiences of the concepts of childhood and then kind of transitioning into adulthood. And I thought about one of the things my mother told me when I was 3 years old, and it's just always stuck with me. She said, there are going to be times when I could learn from you, and that just completely changed my whole perception of the adult role and the child role. And I said, that was the most profound realization for me at the age of 3, that I can be right and you can be wrong and you can learn things from me. And it was actually, it felt very empowering. And I kind of felt a little proud about myself, hopefully not too arrogant, but so now I'm gonna try to be right and, better than you kind of thing. And so it's interesting, having a sense of freedom and feeling empowered as a child. And so yeah, in terms of the childhood experience and growing up, I think there is a certain value of having freedom, and then your parents always say, freedom comes with responsibility, and that's always hard to balance, especially in the teenage years where you're trying to establish who you are and your identity, and it's all about rebellion. And so it's interesting to think one day when I become a parent, how much freedom would I give my child, and how many rules and regulations, would I put down? And there's always that thing of, if you put down too much, then it's going to be rebelled against. The more you persist, the more you resist, kind of thing. So I hope I'm not going too off the topic on tangent. So yeah, that's just about it that I have for now to share. And I'm open to any kinds of questions, culturally related things as well. And yeah, that's it. So, yeah.
Hello, everybody. I come from Thailand, and Kevin told me I could share my story, so I would like to share my stories about who I am and why I am sitting here and why I'm here at Eugene. First of all, I would like to say that I really like Eugene a lot. It's very friendly and very warm welcome, and so I think it's my third home, or because my second home is in Illinois, because I studied there for 3 years. And I would tell you a little bit about Thailand. Thailand I guess you will hear about Thailand, right? Right now we still elect who is going to be our leader now. So Thailand, in Thailand we have democracy and king. So we have king as another our leaders, and and we have prime ministers. And so in the history of Thailand, it's very long time ago. It's about 500 years ago, or maybe like 700 years ago. If we include the history from the northern of Thailand, Chiang Mai is a famous city, and so so we have about 4 kingdoms. The first one is Sukhothai, and then Ayutthaya. Ayutthaya is a very long kingdom. It had a very long period. It's about 400 years old. And then we have Thonburi kingdom is about 15 years old, because the first king of this kingdom called Ratanakosin kingdom, or Jaki. Is right now is about more than 200 years old. So actually, in the name of Thailand, it's very new. It's just about 50 years old, and our own name is Siam, or you call Siam. So because of that change, many Thai people forget about who they are, and when they come from the village or rural area, they will forget where they come from, and then they get the education from central government. So they will transform, or they will be converted to be like Thai people. So the name Thai is a new identity for us. It's about 50 years ago that we just got. And in the old time, we are very diverse. So we, in the south, in the north, for my hometown, from northeast Thailand, my ethnic is Lao. So that's give you a little bit of background about the change and identity in Thailand. And I would like to share a little bit about my life and my experience, and why I can come here. And I was born in our village, in a very small village. It's about 6 kilometers from district town. And my parents had 10 children, and 2 of them died. And I am the first one who was born in the hospital of the district town. In the old time, all of my siblings, they were born with midwives, local midwife. And then after that, from that time, about 30 years ago that I was born, and then there were many changes at that time, because after the Vietnam War, about 30 years ago, after the Vietnam War, many peoples, like Thai and America, Thai was a good friend of America, so we have many investors, and so we something like we boom with economics and infrastructure development. So we have the road, we have the hospital, we have the education. So at that time, our government try to develop education. So they try to support each family to send their children to school. So that's why I was sent to school and learned from school, and for my siblings went to school as well. And then they graduated from universities, and for me, when I was born in a village, I had very little chances, to get privilege or facilities like people in district. And so, but the only thing that I have just dreams. So I always dream, I want to be this, I want to be that. And many people in my village, they just had like, they just send their children to school and then finish like grade 4 or grade 4 in the overtime, and then grade 6, about grade 6, and then they finish, and then they just, continue their families' occupation. Like most of them are farmers, so most of them become farmers. And at that time, about 20 years ago, many factories, occurred in the big city. Many people from northeast Thailand migrated to big cities, for example, like Bangkok or the east. And so, and then when they got children, they send their children back to the village. Their parents or grandparents raised the children from the village, and then when they finish grade 6, and then send them back to the big city. It just be like this in the village in Thailand. And some of them, when have good chance, and then they get some good things in their life. And then, so I continue my studies because my parents, always taught me and my siblings to get the highest education, because they believe that the education is only way to get out of, you can call like suffering, not real suffering, but we have rice field, we have rice to eat, we have the river. But I think my parents think that in the world will be changed, something like that, so would be changed, so they just send us to school, because we have about little rice field and we have 8 children, so the rice field cannot support them. So I just continue, and my parents always encouraged me to dream, to be this, to be that, not like other villagers in my village. And then I continue and to study in universities, and then I apply for scholarship from Northern Illinois University about 7 years ago, and then apply for scholarship at Thailand, then I just come here. And what I see about the transition of the youth in America and in Thailand is very different. In here, I see that just like Professor Close talking about, to give the power to young adults, to work and to give them the power and to run the organization. I think that's a good idea, but in Thailand it's different. When I was an undergraduate student, I don't have any chance, to work. I just study. I got supported from my sister, who worked in a firm in Bangkok. So I got about 4 years. I got full support from her, and I don't have chance to work. And at that time, students, just studied in university and just do the exam and then just pass. They don't have any project. They don't have any organization for them. And for nowadays, it's still, I think it's still almost the same, because before I came here, I was a instructor at university. So I still like the students over there, the undergrad students in Thailand, they are still they are still follow their professors and just do the exam, just pass the exam, and then when pass the exam, just get a job. not like in US. In US, you have something like dream, something like that. You want to do this, do that, and then even though you are not your dream is not come true, you just wait and then you just follow your dream. But in Thailand, it's not that. And then something that I see the different, like we try to study because we want money, we want to get rich, something like that. And at the end, I would like to close my speech that like I because right now almost all of the youth, just like your age, or the people like your age in my country, they can continue education in universities or in college, and I just hope that they have something to contribute to society, not just studies to get job and get money and live day by day, and just hope someday they will have their dream and make their dream come true and pay back to society where they come from. That. So if you have any question relating to that, please ask. Thank you.
I did actually, yeah. It was called Sophia College, and it was an all-girls college. And yeah, it was, the experience was very, very different where, the professor would, well, it kind of sounds similar to here. You have a professor lecturing, and then you take notes. But the way the assignments and all were structured is that you just cram at the end of the year. Like there's no, like here the assignments are way more interactive, where you have like something due like, every class, or you have like a quiz, or you'll have like a paper due. Like, it's very like you're in touch with your work. Whereas in the college I went to in Bombay, it was just like you had this major final exam with like really, you have to do a lot of like studying and memorizing from the textbooks for the exams. And so that was very intimidating, and everybody would be really stressed out. So, yeah.
When I was in college in the 1960s, one of the favorite bumper stickers was "Question Authority." And I'm reminded by listening to all of our panelists today, but especially to Sandy, that I grew up in that particular era. When we went to college, I mean, it was even worse than what she's described, to be honest with you. We were not allowed to have any interaction with students of the opposite sex beyond a certain hour. We had to, if we wanted to have a girlfriend, or there was no idea of men and women or anything like that. I mean, it was really unheard of. But we had to take the woman to the residence hall. It was called the Mush Rush, and we would stand there and kiss each other. And I'm not kidding you. It would, and then all of a sudden, Mrs. B, who was the house person, would come, and she'd ring a little bell, and guys had 3 minutes to get out. And if you violated that particular rule, you were not allowed to come back for 5 days. But my point in describing this is that it was only set up for a certain type of student who could follow rules. Meaning, if you could not follow the rules that were established for you, you could not stay at college. And what we attempted to do in the 1960s is very much what I'm trying to describe to you in terms of the youth that are disenfranchised from higher education now, because there is a major difference between who gets to go to college now and who doesn't. Again, we're tapping a very small percentage of the talent that's out there in the world. And we challenged all those things. You know, I'm pleased that, you know, to say in the 1960s and 70s, and I graduated from college in 1971, so I was right smack dab in this era, and we challenged every aspect of what the university said we were supposed to do. We had sit-ins, we had teach-ins, we didn't go to class, we did marches, and all these kinds of things, which created the university environment that you all, in a way, are experiencing today, which is much more freedom. But the basic structure still exists that says that a certain type of person is not welcome in higher education. And it's a person who's not rule-bound. It's a person who doesn't understand what the rules are. I mean, believe it or not, there are many students out there that don't understand that you have to make an application, that don't understand that there are scholarship opportunities that they're very much eligible for, that have no knowledge of all the things that you all and I took for granted. How many colleges are you going to apply to? How did you do in your SAT tests? There's a whole bunch of people who don't understand this, and we need to teach these people how to access this information. And I believe that the youth of today are probably in better shape to be able to help each other, to empower each other, so that there is this broader sense, and then true change will occur. And so I'm just reminded so much of how much control I appear to have as a white male director of a program, university professor, all these kinds of things, and that it is incumbent upon all of us to share that power and to teach our youth, especially those youth that are at risk to not finish high school and not gain access to higher education. Because as I listened to Sandy, that was my experience, and I somehow made it through.
I was wondering, organizations like LEAD, is that really enough to like make a student apply to college and like get through it? Because if they don't have like all the preparation or like support from their family or like their community otherwise.
You make an excellent point. It isn't enough, but as you know, it's a beginning and a first step. So for example, FHS students that are involved in mentorship and tutoring programs, in application workshops, they don't just start with students when they're seniors. They start with kids when they're freshmen and sophomores, so that they create the goal setting, then create the momentum and the peer relationships, so that by the time they're seniors, they're in a position to do it. So yes, it needs to be a combination, because you know, it's got to be the regular public schools, it's got to be organizations like LEAD, and it has to be people such as University of Oregon students who then participate as mentors for these youth at all stages of their process. So I agree, it's not enough, but it's an important first step.
This is directed toward all the panelists. Do you think that because there has been such a change in how much freedom incoming college students have been given in the past 30 or 40 years, that has affected their quality of education either negatively or positively?
That's an excellent question. I mean, we had no freedom, so you know, so we had to sneak it. You know, we had to sneak. We snuck around a lot.
But isn't that what freedom is?
Huh?
Isn't that what freedom is? Like
right, we snuck around, and now you don't necessarily have to sneak around so much. I mean, I was just so, you know, I was reading this one statement out of page 18 about, if for some reason a woman is to come onto the floor, there are two things which must be done first. Get permission from Mrs. Chartel. 2, make sure that there is no one in the hall clothed indecently. Then take them directly to your room and directly out. And so, yeah, there is a lot more freedom now, but I also think that with that freedom has come an expectation that it's not that big a deal. Whereas for us, what was unknown, it was so exciting. I mean, we used to do things like panty raids. I don't know if people do that anymore. I mean, we literally would have panty raids, and we would do these crazy kinds of dysfunctional things, and yes, we would spend lots of times focusing on them and thinking about them. We were not allowed to use alcoholic beverages, and so what would we do? We would sneak around. And, you know, so I don't know if I think in many cases we spent a tremendous amount of energy trying to get away with things that students nowadays just think, big deal. So there's not so much pent-up emotion and tension. But that's just, it's just, you know, my thinking.
I think that I would say that it really, sometimes it will depend on the individual student. I think that, again, I think I started off by saying that this is the greatest time of transition in any person's life. They really are moving from youth and childhood into adulthood, and that balance can be easily done by some students and not as easily done by other students. And you know, obviously for here, it's even though you know, Dan talks about alcohol, but the same thing is true here for alcohol or drug usage and those sorts of things for students. And so I think that it really depends on if they can handle it and those sorts of things. And now today, I think for students that the work that or the interaction that parents have also still with their college career affects their education. Usually, hopefully, more in that respect on the positive note, and hopefully the residence hall staff for the same thing if they're living in residence halls. But I think that for it's different for every individual student. I think that some will walk in, and although they have all those freedoms, they're able to handle that as well as they're here for that education, and they're going to get a good quality of education. And there are a lot of students who can handle a lot of that freedom and have a really, really, really good time in some of the stuff that they do and still do relatively well in their education too. But they may not have embraced that education as much while they're here, and it may take them a little bit later on in life to really know that education isn't just about the classes that they're going to, it's about the day-to-day learning that we all do even as adults. And I know I'm guilty of that when I was in college. So I really do depend. I think it depends on the individual.
Mm-hmm. There's one other factor too. For many, many, many years, there was a draft. Mm-hmm. And so consequently, especially for males, we had to be in school to keep our 2S deferment. So consequently, the vast majority of the males that I knew went to college, not necessarily for all the right reasons. We went to college because it gave us a deferment, and so it was an artificial requirement, because if you were kicked out of school or anything like that, then you were at risk. So there were cultural differences. I imagine if you instituted a draft right now and required people to do well in school and not get in trouble and things like this, that it would, again, provide another one of these arbitrary adult rule structures that would cause some people to be pretty irritated and other people to be more compliant. Mm-hmm. But again, it's this idea that rule-bound organizations are good for certain people and they're not good for other people.
I think it kind of ties into that nature-nurture debate.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to someone the other day who said that she knew someone who never had an urge to do anything bad, like have a drink or flirt with someone or smoke a cigarette, or, you know, and that person was talking about like how she feels just guilty about doing certain things and maybe not spending enough time with, you know, her children or things like that. And so yeah, I think it's really, you know, it's so individual. There are some people like back home in India who it's all related to like the socioeconomic status, where there's no question about getting educated. It's all about get into the family business like when you're, you know, 18, and there's just, it's like parents view it as waste of time. Like, there's no way we even have the money to invest in this kind of thing. Your education is going to be your life experience that you get through this family business, and that's your reality for the rest of your life, you know. So it's interesting, like, what is important to what person, like, what are the family, you know, expectations and values and things like that. So,
you know, this other thing that caught my attention while I was thinking about this topic is when I was in college, you had to be 21 to vote. You had to be 21 to, you know, access all these adult things, and then we drove that law down to 18, and, you know, because we believed we were competent adults at the age of 18. And so you know, and if you look at all the laws around children, about when children are emancipated, when children can be on their own, when children can vote, tobacco, alcohol, things like this, these are all in flux, where we don't quite know what is that perfect age. If you look back through, you know, couple generations before, you saw that the mean age of women in certain societies having children was 16, and they were considered to be adults. Now if you have sex with a 16-year-old and you're over 16, that's called statutory rape. So you see that there are all kinds of laws that have been designed to, you know, establish a base for what are the behaviors that adults need to exhibit, and that's changed dramatically. So I'm looking at all those kind of. I mean, there's a large body of research about girls and when girls become women, and there's a great book called Delinquent Daughters. And Delinquent Daughters is a book about. Have you read that? No. Oh, yeah. It's a great book, but what it does is it traces the kind of laws related to adulthood for women, and what was happening at the latter part of the 19th century up through the early part of the 20th century. And the thesis of the book simply is that it's cognitive versus biological. That women are that the cognitive side dictates when a person becomes an adult, because biologically people are developing secondary sex characteristics earlier and earlier and earlier, which is allowing for this biological determinism. So it is important that all the laws around children are always in a state of flux. We had a big case about whether or not children should be allowed to make decisions about which parent they go to in a divorce proceedings. You know, most of the courts will make that decision without adequately consulting the child, because it's perceived that the child is not capable cognitively to make good decisions about themselves. And so consequently, adults make those decisions, where it's pretty clear in many cases that young people have a very good idea of who they would like to live with and who they perceive to be their parents. And we often don't validate that among children. So there's a lot of reasons for our law structures to not appreciate and validate children's ideas and to place them in dependent situations. So, and that is a problem in our society.
I just wanted to say one thing. I think back to, like, my mother had me when she was 21, and she was married when I think she was, I'm sorry. She was married, she got married at the age of 21, and then she had me probably at like age 25. And I'm 26 right now, and it's unimaginable for me. It's like, I don't know. And this is my own individual perspective and experience with like having a child by now, and you know, being a wife and being a mom. And it's so interesting to just think about like, you know, the generations, and it's, you know, how things change. And it's like, you know, you were talking about like biology and cognition and all that, and I was thinking like environment, you know, and like in Indian culture a few years ago, it's like, yeah, you should be married by age 21, and you know, and have a family. And so it's like your environment forces you to grow up faster and be mature. And I remember having this conversation with my mom, and she said, you know, we didn't know what we were doing, like we just had to do it, you know. And as kids we perceived it as, oh, mom, you know, oh, dad, like they know what they're doing, like we really look up to them. And now, like being kind of older and having this conversation, like going back in time, you didn't know what the hell you were doing, but you know, you looked like you knew what you were doing, and you portrayed it so well, and there's always food on the table, you know, and you know, dad had a stable job. And so, but it's just interesting, like we didn't know the struggles and their nervousness about not knowing what the hell they were doing. So I don't know, it's just interesting. Like I guess, you know, if I was a mom, like I think I would have to fake it till I made it or something like that. Portraying that I know it all or something. I don't know, it's interesting. So any questions? What are you guys thinking?
I just would like to share about student undergrad life in Thailand. Do you think Thai students, you know, Thai undergrad students can live together? I mean, can get married during their study in university? Do you have any idea? Yeah, in this case, Thai students, they can live together, but they cannot get married. If they get married, it's going to be the big trouble, because their family didn't allow, and because when they get married, there are many processes to get married. So the male have to take the female to meet their parents. And do you think, can they have a child while they are studying at university? No. Yes, even no. Yeah, if they had a child, they have to get abortion, you know, immediately, because in terms of their families and their friends, they won't get accepted if they get pregnant or have a child during that one. Even though we have right to vote at 18, and we still consider that if they are not graduate from university, they cannot get married, or they cannot have children.
Any other questions? We've got about 5 minutes. If not, Sandy, did you find your...
Yeah, I did. So let me just close by reading 2 quick things. House Mother Mrs. Eva Banks. During the coming year, you will gain a deep attachment for Mrs. Banks. You will find that Mrs. Banks is there to keep a motherly watch over her boys, who at times need some motherly advice to keep out of trouble. You will find her combined office and living room off the main downstairs lounge. You will be seeing a lot of her during the year, so why not go in and get acquainted with her right away, so that you can truly become more of a family group working together to share our problems and joys. That is from Butler Hall, which was an all-male hall. And then there was one from Gentle Hall for the females. Your house mother for the coming year will be Mrs. Georgiana Johnson. Her room is located off the main lounge downstairs. It is the house mother's duty to keep a motherly watch over the girls at Gentle. She is there to help you, so get to know her. obviously these were from the same institutions. And I am thinking about next week going to our Residence Hall Association and proposing a new dress code. So I'm going to take it directly out of this. So we'll see what they have to say. Because you can only wear grubbies, which many of you are in right now, only at certain times during the day, and you are all in violation if we pass that new policy.
I thought girls all had to wear dresses when they left the residence halls to go to classes.
Well, what it writes is that grubbies in here, it refers to cutoffs, sweatshirts, etc. But grubbies can be worn in your room and around the dorm unless otherwise specified. Curlers can be worn with cover out of the dorm Friday after 5 p.m., all day Saturday, and Sunday after 4 p.m. Shoes must be worn in Gentle's first floor lounge and anywhere on campus outside of the dorm. Curlers.
Oh, curlers.
Curlers.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
That's so funny.
That's great. I really appreciate it.
Was that your last one, Sam?
That was my last one.
Please join me in thanking our faculty.